Labadiena, kviečiu visus užimti.
Good afternoon. Please take your seats. Please take your seat next to the table. We have plenty of seats. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Those of you who are online and those of you who participate live. Today we are going to talk about work-life balance, and it is a great pleasure that this subject is now being analyzed so widely. I am Mintautė Jurkutė, and I am head of the communication. I am going to moderate the work of today. I would like to begin from the welcome address, and I give the floor to the Speaker of the Seimas, Ms. Victoria Čmilytė Nilsen, to congratulate all the participants on this occasion. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will be open. Among the reasons that led me to politics, the topical relevance of family and work balance was one of the priorities. Having come to address this issue, I have experienced it myself, how topical it was. Besides, it is not only specificity of Lithuania. The entire Europe is looking for ways to help women to achieve work-life balance. When I presented the family package last autumn, I stressed that these are the initiatives aimed at helping families to reconcile their children's raising and careers, making it easier for women to return to the labor market without making harm to their family, and being together as much as possible with their children and loved ones. Then I asked politicians to contribute to this process, and a number of them reacted and presented a number of initiatives, including Minister for Social Security and Labor and politicians from both ruling and opposition parties. This means that we do not ignore reality. There is still much room for improvement and a number of challenges. Before we create an optimal environment in which families can be created without sacrificing careers in any field, let it be science, arts, culture, politics, business, sports, or social activities. We are still working step by step, and events such as today's conference make this process both faster and of high quality. I wish you all the best of luck. Thank you very much, Speaker of the Seimas, and now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Raskevičius. He is chair on the Committee of Equal Opportunities. Colleagues, I can call you like this. Welcome to our meeting. The name of today's conference is formulated as a question: why we need to achieve work and life balance. And this question is not rhetorical. It is very practical indeed. And I am convinced that the key to equal opportunities is in the answer to this question on how to provide opportunities for all family members to take part in the life of the country. I am happy that we are going to look for the answer to this practical and not rhetorical question at the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. I have personally felt that family life and work balance was not that topical for me, and first of all that I'm a man and career prospects are more important to me than sleep, recreation or health. Secondly, I am a person for whom society historically repeats that such people like me are not and cannot be parents. However, life is wonderful because it is completely unpredictable. I and my son, we are very lucky because he is being raised in the family of two mothers. We have 3 hearts and 6 hands that we can give as a gift in addressing the concerns and priorities of our son. This, however, is not easy, but it is even more difficult in cases when one of the family members is entrusted with childcare. I would like to be able to spend more time with my son, and I believe that this is the case for a very large number number of fathers in Lithuania. On the eve of the Day of Protection of Children, it is more important than ever to speak about this. In Lithuania, as in most other European countries, parental leave is much more often taken by women than men. Last year, Office of the Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson had a study which revealed that 7 out of 10 women felt guilty combining professional activity and raising children. The current law on equal opportunities and equal opportunities for women and men contains a prohibition of discrimination on the grounds of gender. This discrimination is prohibited in employment, educational establishments, consumer rights, and public authorities. Nevertheless, it is still noticeable that it is difficult for women to recognize such forms of discrimination, first and foremost due to gender stereotypes in society. In many cases, these stereotypes are invisible. They act through stagnating social norms, through what is acceptable and the so-called normal. The Parliament currently has 38 women members of the Seimas, representing only 20% of the entire population of the Parliament. The only political group in the Seimas where women represent the corresponding number in the society that is more than half is the small political group of Freedom. While the right to participate in democratic election is equal, women's expectations and stereotypes in society and politics prevent them from actively engaging in the political life of the country. It must be also acknowledged that we still lack strategic planning and a systemic approach in the area of women's rights and empowerment. To make it easier for people to find better balance between family and work, we need to do everything to encourage men in Lithuania to become more involved in childcare. And we have to encourage companies and organizations to make greater use of equal opportunities measures, therefore facilitating and balancing childcare work. Today in Lithuania, it is still inappropriate for men to cry, and it is still appropriate for women to carry out the bulk of domestic and childcare work. Let's challenge these social norms, not only with slogans, but also with real public policies. I believe that today's conference will make a successful contribution to this work. Thank you all for gathering, and I wish you a meaningful and insightful event. Thank you very much, Chair of the Committee on Human Rights of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. And now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Birutė Sabatauskaitė, Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson of the Republic of Lithuania. Good afternoon. It is great to welcome you all attending this conference live as well as online. It is a very important topic, that is work-life balance. This topic is very topical in this time of rapid changes, of the increasing speed of life. This topic is very important for each and every one of us. I am certain that we are discussing it with our friends and co-workers without even realizing this. We know this very well because this represents our daily life challenges. Sometimes we say we haven't had enough time to visit our parents, or just to do something with our children, or simply to do what we enjoy doing. Therefore, work-life balance has to be continuous priority in addressing the statutory changes. We have to see how it works in practice, and we have to see what are the effects of different pieces of legislation on this, because we have to ensure equal opportunities for women, for mothers, and for people who do not have children to balance work and professional and life. We have to take into consideration people with disabilities, or people who have other health concerns, or who have a need to care for their loved ones. Therefore, Today, when speaking about work-life balance, I would like to remember what we have done during 2 years of our work. We had projects on the we had legal and social study. We also had focus groups of working women, working mothers, and working fathers. We worked with employment officers and talked with them how to better ensure work and life balance. We talked about child care and the necessary legislative changes or political measures. It is evident that for a number of years they were not sufficient. We also need strategic attitude when developing family policy. Sometimes we say, or we like to say, that we believe in gender balance and gender equality. However, I dare say that it is vice versa. We see that more than half people in poverty are people who take care of children alone, and in most cases they are women. The inequality of income is being distributed in different sectors, and women, the pay gap of men is still huge in Lithuania. This also affects equal opportunities. You can find more information on the website balansos.lt. Another issue is includes the requirements that we have, the social requirements for men and women. Who, for example, who has to take care of children, and quite often men who take paternity leave are asked, and what is your wife going to do? Or is there anyone who's going to help you, as if they would be incapable of doing it? And on the contrary, women who decide to come back to employment earlier, they are usually accused of not paying enough attention to their children. Today we are going to listen to different presentations. Hopefully we'll gain more knowledge. But I can say that even in our personal life, we can find an opportunity to review the formula of our work-life balance. And I encourage you to visit our website, which is called balanso.lt, in order to assess the areas where we have this balance and the areas that lack it. I would like to wish you the productive discussion, and I would like to wish you the ability of doing this review in all kinds of areas of your life. And we also need to assess different workplaces in order to ensure how work-life balance is ensured. When looking for different opportunities, we have to create better opportunities because they will ensure more gender equality and create a happier society. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ombudsman, for your welcome address. And now let us move to our presentations. Before the presentations, let me say a few things concerning organizational items. The international life-work balance is organized together with the Center for Equal Advancement, the Ombudsman for Equal Opportunities. We have a hybrid conference where we have our guests here in this room and also people connected on Zoom platform. So let me inform you that we have interpretation here. If you need it, you can choose the language. On the Zoom platform, you have the interpretation button. You can also ask your questions during the question-answer session. And those online, could you please ask your questions on the Zoom platform, on the dialog box in the YouTube channel? If you watch us on YouTube, we will try to read them and answer all of them. And you will be given time for questions after the presentation, so please note down those questions to be able to ask them later. Let me remind the participants that we have the recording of this conference and broadcast, but all the material presented by the speakers and the presenters will be available for you. If you want to get the material, please inform us by email and we will send you all the material. And now we will have 3 presentations, and afterwards it will be followed by the questions and answer session. After the coffee break, we will be having a discussion with the panelists. Now, let me give the floor to the first speaker, Yolanda Ringerdem, from the Institute for Gender Equality. She will speak on work-life balance and challenges in the EU.
Taip, laba diena.
Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for this event and for giving me the privilege to be the first to make my presentation on a very topical issue. We have many topical issues today, as well as concerns. The topic is important to the extent that
Na, gal dabar jau gerai. Viename iš
in one of the events, the head of the commission said that if the pandemic has taught us anything, it is the time that we devote to care of our families is the most important. And without this care that was required by a large part of the society, and care given by schools, hospitals, and care institutions, or care that was provided at home, was very vital to reducing the rate of possible loss during the pandemic. Different care institutions historically and care in our families was very important in previous disasters in the history. It provoked a discussion that care of others on the political level has never been discussed so much as in the context of the pandemic. You know that the European Commission is drafting the European Care Strategy. This is a strategy that will aim to address this challenge and not only to discuss the formal sector that ensures care services, but also the aspects of informal care. This is extremely important because historically the private sphere was something that was never interfered in by politics. We have the directive on the work-life balance that has to be transposed into the national law touches upon certain issues of that informal care. My topic is very wide, and due to this shortage of time, I have to limit myself to 3 aspects. I will speak Lithuanian, and my presentation slides will be in English, and I will speak on 3 aspects. I will present the data related to parental leave, and secondly, childcare and long-term services, and finally, informal care or unpaid care, which is provided in families, inside families. This picture, well, it is difficult to see all the countries. I circled Lithuania here in this picture. This picture shows 10 EU member states where parents, fathers, take parental leave in over 10% of cases. In other countries, less than 10% of fathers use this opportunity. In Lithuania, the trends are similar. According to this methodology, it is quite difficult to compare when we speak about childcare leaves because of the differences in the systems and payment. But in this picture, Lithuania is encircled in this picture. Sweden is at the top. If we look at the social insurance fund data, during the first year of childcare leave, 90% of women take this leave. In the second year, we have 38% of men and 62% of women. Nearly all men work. Women take care of their children. And are insured by the social insurance. This statistics shows that Lithuania is ranked quite high. But many men on the statistics work, but actually childcare is made by women. Compared to the year 2006, parental leave cases have increased. So this incidence is quite low, but in a year term we have a positive change, and we have to take this into account. Now I want to look at the initiatives of some countries that implement certain incentives for fathers to choose their parental leave. We have to speak about different measures here. For example, the leave may be prolonged, or maybe some financial compensation entailed can be paid for a longer period depending on a country. So you can see in the slide the number of countries and initiatives implemented to promote fathers take up parental leave. In some countries, we have measures which says that the leave can be prolonged if both mothers and fathers take parental leave. For example, in Romania, if a father does not use the right to parental leave, the period of parental leave becomes shorter. In Sweden is famous for father's quota, 90 days of father's quota, which is compensated on a quite a high level. When we speak childcare leave, discussions are underway on different systems, on the level of compensation, on the duration of this leave. I would like to pinpoint some other aspects that are discussed less frequently. The eligibility to childcare leave. As you can see, there are 17 member states in the first line that have employment conditions related to eligibility in criteria. For example, in Lithuania, we have 12 months employment record in order to receive child leave benefit. As you can also see 7 member states where self-employed are denied to access to paid parental leave. And also same-sex couples in 11 member states are excluded from getting parental leave. If we look more specifically, 1 in 5 people in the EU cannot use parental leave, 34% of women and 23% of men. I have in mind both working and not working parents. The main reasons for this is, in terms of Lithuania, is due to unemployment or inactivity, economic inactivity, or due to the too small employment record. And we have countries marked in orange. Self-employed people in these countries cannot get parental leave. You may ask, what is the alternative best practice in this area? Sweden, Finland, and Croatia are the best examples where parental leave is not the right of parents, but the right of children, and therefore this paid leave is universal and it does not depend on the economic status of a parent, because each child has a right to child care. And therefore, benefits are not related to any requirements. And this is statistics about employed persons. When we look at employed persons, then this gap among eligible and ineligible parents is much lower. In the EU, 1 in 10 employed persons cannot use parental leave. This is an important aspect during policy making. We have to look when drafting laws on how many parents will be left behind the margin. Another important aspect is care gap. This is public child care straight after parental leave. you can see on the right side the countries that have the greatest care gap when the childcare leave is over and public childcare is unavailable for children. And these gaps are then often filled by women. In Lithuania, childcare is not guaranteed for children, and when the childcare leave ends, the child is not guaranteed the public childcare, and if the kindergarten isn't available, then it is the problem of families. And there are some countries where no care gap exists because children are guaranteed public childcare after the childcare leave ends for parents. Another aspect that I want to point out, my slides don't move. This is the availability of childcare services. In 2002, Barcelona targets were adopted, and they included the guarantee of childcare services for children under the age of 3 for every third child, for 1 in 3 children, and this should be covered by 90% from the age of 3. And 12 years after the targets were set, we have 10 countries that are circled in yellow, have either achieved some of their objectives, and we have 7 countries, including Lithuania, encircled in red, where none of the targets have been implemented. It is important to speak about childcare institutions. Lithuania is encircled on this slide, and this represents childcare arrangements by parents. This is a blue line, and Lithuania is top 5, where childcare for children under the age of 3 is the responsibility of parents. So you can see the dark blue line. A pink line represents countries where childcare of children under the age of 3 is the responsibility of institutions, public institutions. So we can see that there's a huge gap here in the European Union among different countries. Why it is important to speak about childcare institutions? I want to show this correlation analysis that we made in our research on the accessibility to childcare services and its relation to gender equality. Statistically, if we look at different parental leaves, different employment opportunities, and other services and accessibility to other help or assistance, the accessibility of childcare institutions has the greatest statistical influence on gender equality. If you look at countries that are on the right, that have the highest gender equality index, These are the countries that have achieved Barcelona targets. They include Denmark, Sweden, France, Spain, Portugal. So these are the countries that have a high gender equality index and have accessible childcare services. Another aspect that I want to address, this is a problematic issue. 40% of households in Lithuania say that long-term care service needs for elderly people are not insured. Very often we speak about childcare, but we fail to remember long-term care of the elderly. For example, Malta has a very strong sandwich generation. For example, when women in their pre-pension period, they are forced to take care of the elderly and their grandchildren. And in that country, long-term and childcare services are not provided. And these women in the pre-pension age are not able to stay in employment. The last aspect that I wanted to address is informal care, which is unpaid care. As you can see, 80% of women and 30% of men are involved in daily routines in their households. 2/3 of men devote less than 1 hour for this. This is a huge problem. And you can see in the second line, you can see a shift of unpaid care. And 45,000 women of working age in Lithuania cannot work. They are not looking for work because they have certain responsibilities in their families, because they have to take care of children or the elderly in their families. When we speak about this informal care in Lithuania is ranked 20 out of 27. So according to the index of our institute. And my conclusions are that, first of all, we should address a very important topic which causes some confrontations, that we have to involve parents in taking care of children and in parental leave. This is not only the issue of women's ambition and gender equality. This is also the issue of the right of a child, because every child has the right to be cared by both mother and father for equal periods of time. Sometimes we very often are diverged in our discussions on that. Services is another aspect. We lack those services, and women fill the gap because of the lack of the services. If the services are too expensive or non-existent, then this is the responsibility of women to take care of children and elderly. Work-life balance policies should be better coordinated. Because when we think about childcare leave only, and we don't think about other possibilities and services and accessibilities, we have very serious issues at hand. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for taking too much of your time.
Ačiū labai Jolantai Ringerdai, tikrai buvo labai įdomu klausyti.
Thank you very much, Yolanda Ringerdem. Indeed, it was very interesting. Therefore, I didn't want to interrupt you. I hope it was interesting for those who listened as well. Thank you once again. And now we are going to move on to the next question. We have heard about different statistics, and indeed, we need men to do more. And the question is very topical: how can we achieve it? In Lithuania, we are at the crossroads, and now we see that 7 people out of 10 already agree that men have to be encouraged to take paternity leave. However, practically, we see only every 4th father taking paternity leave. Therefore, it is a great pleasure to dedicate some time to this matter now, and we are going to look into different measures and strategies in raising fathers' contribution. And now I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ellie Scambor. She is from the Institute for Men's and Gender Research in Austria, and her presentation is called Caring Masculinities and Supportive Policies in the EU. The floor is yours.
Hello. A warm welcome to the Work-Life Balance Conference in Vilnius. I want to say thank you to Vilana and Virginia for the opportunity to speak about caring masculinities and supportive policies in Europe. In the next minutes, I will put my focus on major changes during the last decades, on caring masculinities in practice, and on supportive policies. Here, especially on leave regulations, which can improve or hinder the process towards gender equal share of care. So why do men move on towards a larger share of care work at home or also in professional life? What are the forces that drive this development, and what are the forces that oppose it? And how can policies support the process? I will start with major changes in the last decades. First, for a long time, gender was seen as a women's concern, while men were seen as neutral and normal. But gradually, the issue of man and gender equality has been addressed in gender equality policies in Europe, with a growing recognition that women's employment and men's share of care are linked issues. This is increasingly reflected in leave regulations. Second, changes such as the increase in the employment rate of women or far-reaching changes in the world of work, for example, the increased importance of the service sector, have had a major impact on gender relations in the last decades and have raised the need actually for new care arrangements. This means typical allocations of care work to women have become fragile in modern societies. Paid labor has become an overall norm of life, independent of gender. This raised the question of how care work can be redistributed. Third, changing economies influenced men's prospects in secure long-term employment, as this cannot be put into practice any longer. So discontinuity and also insecurity increasingly characterize men's working life too. COVID-19 has reinforced these dynamics. Under these changing conditions, our Norwegian colleague Øystein Gullvåg Holte spoke about a shift in men's gender ideal from a breadwinner role in which men
Vyro vaidmuo, jis jau nėra pinigų uždirbėjas. Atsiprašau,
roles. Men's share of care in this sense can be seen as a counterpart to traditional concepts of male power. For example, hegemonic masculinity, a concept for a cultural dominant position of men described by Raven Connell already in the 19th, has often been closely related to labor, prescribing a male norm of family absent breadwinners and associated to overperformance, long hours work, for example. Fourth, the first systematic study on the role of men in gender equality, 2011-12 in Europe, showed men's increased activity in some areas of unpaid care work and care jobs, while the care gap still remains and regional differences are significant. Caring masculinities became a normative political concept, became a research paradigm with increasing global evidence. We based the concept of caring masculinities on Nancy Fraser's concept of care as a human norm, and care, therefore, as an obligation for all genders. We know that men's involvement in care is often reduced to fatherhood, is often reduced to things like changing babies' nappies, but we know that we have to widen the perspective. As you can see here on the slide, care means a deeper kind of attention to the needs of others, to the needs of children, but also to the needs of colleagues, of dependent people, of neighbors, whoever. And it also includes attitudes towards gender equality, attitudes towards a rejection of male dominance, a rejection of violence. It also includes care for nature and the ability to care for oneself. It includes self-care. This is how we defined the caring masculinity concept. So, do men really care in practice? There is increasing empirical evidence of men's changing roles. The study on the role of men in gender equality, already 2013, outlined first a convergence of basic labor market characteristics between women and men. For example, an increased employment rate of women in many countries, at the same time, a reduction of work time for men. This is one result. Another result is that it also showed an empirical connection, as you can see here, between work satisfaction and actual work time. So in this sense, male employees are most satisfied with their working conditions in countries where weekly working hours are comparably low, while they are least satisfied in countries with the highest numbers of weekly working hours. It should be emphasized that men's involvement in caregiving has met a variety of traditional barriers, including culture and stereotypes. Even in the more advanced countries, we know that there are stories about elk hunting in Sweden or about rebuilding houses when men take father's leave, but there are also other stories about men taking care for children or relatives, evident in current research. If we concentrate on the question of how men's proportion of unpaid work has changed in the past decades, we see a picture of huge variations in European countries due to different factors, including labor market conditions, including politics, including different parental leave systems. This picture mainly focuses on men's share of care for children in heterosexual parent couples, which constitute the majority of families. Nevertheless, the importance of a broad concept of families, including homosexual or trans families, friendship and other relations, has to be underlined. But these issues cannot be fully treated here on the basis of the available data. Increasingly, the answer to the question, do men care, is yes, as measured by men's increased share of unpaid care activities and domestic work, with large variations across European societies. In the north, as you can see here, men's share of childcare on domestic work is more than 2 times higher than in southern and post-socialist countries with lowest values. And we still see a gender care gap. Looking at the IG results on unpaid care work based on data from 2015, and looking at IG data from Lithuania, we see a comparatively high gender care gap. In 2060, 53% of women and 38% of men were involved in caring for children at least several times a week. So what are the reasons for different share rates in Europe? There is a bunch of causing factors associated with men's larger involvement. First, stereotypes and social sanctions still hit men who go outside the bubble. The traditional male breadwinner role, as the current Men in Care organizational study results in the last 3 years have shown in some countries just recently. We will point out to some of the results today. Second, the home sphere and the professional sphere can be more or less balanced. Some couples prefer a higher level of income on the man's side, with a longer parental leave period for the mother, while others give more priority to the women's job and career, with the man taking advantage of more parental leave benefits. In most countries, the male provider household has now been replaced by a dual provider couple household, but men still have better paid jobs and women still do more care work. Third, the variation of couple arrangements is linked to labor market conditions and gender equality policies as well as family policies. These structures cannot be considered in isolation. Some countries manage progress towards a more equal share of care and domestic work and increased utilization of women's talent in professional life, while other countries, with an emphasis on the male main provider role, offer less opportunities for men's caregiving. Fourth, in fact, couple arrangements usually mirror state regulations based on different gender concepts, based on different gender norms, as well as on labor market conditions. These regulations can lead to an increase of men's share of care for children or sometimes to a re-traditionalization of gender roles. And last but not least, let's talk about supportive regulations. Research shows that father quota and paternity leave give fathers more of a choice to participate in caring. Parental leave and paternity leave themes vary greatly across Europe, from 1 day or no day at all to 4.5 months non-transferable paid leave period for fathers in Iceland. The highest fathers' leave rates are reported for countries which provide first leave days earmarked for fathers, second paid leave days with 80 to 100% compensation rates. Recent research like the Men in Care study, it's an 80 country study, have shown the importance of policies and regulations for promoting men's caregiving. Fathers take leave when it is non-transferable and when it is highly paid. Let's have a look at Iceland. In the year 2000, each parent in Iceland became entitled to 3 months individual non-transferable paid parental leave and 3 months transferable, the 3+3+3 regulation. And it was based on 80% income. So fathers in Iceland took on average 90 days on parental leave in 2017, for example. Since 2021, the leave was extended to 12 months, 6 months for each parent, and 1 month transferable. No, 1.5 months transferable. Let's have a look at the situation in Spain. As much as 80% of employed fathers had used their entitlement to paternity leave on average 30 days in 2018, Also in Spain in 2021, the leave regulation has changed to 100% payment, 16 weeks non-transferable leave for each parent. Or have a look at Norway. 71% of men used the 50 days father's quota or more days of paid leaves in 2013. Since 2018, the total length of 100% paid leave is 46 weeks, and father's quota, or for same-sex partners, is 15 weeks. To stretch leave to 59 weeks with an 80% month coverage is a much used option in Norway. The length of the father's quota is then 19 weeks. These countries in our Remaining Care study showed comparable high take-up rates of father's leave, which is surely related to a leave design that offers highly paid and non-transferable individual leaves. Nevertheless, there is still potential for improvement in policies because in most of these countries, solely mothers are entitled to breastfeeding leaves. Exception here is Spain. And second, in most of these countries, parental leave includes a part that is transferable from one parent to the other. In these cases, mostly mothers end up taking the transferable leave for cultural reasons, for economical reasons. And this creates a great gender gap in work-life balance at the beginning of the family cycle. Later in life, it is more difficult to revert. This still creates a barrier for men's use of full-time parental leave and for taking turns with the mother. To sum up, caring masculinities are advanced in some countries with respect to men's participation in unpaid work and their use of father's leave, while there is much less evidence about men's increasing participation in care in countries with relatively low payment of leaves for fathers and a lack of use it or lose it models. According to research, best policy practice for caring masculinity is the establishment of individual, non-transferable and highly paid leaves for fathers. And these leaves have to be as long as mother's leaves. I come to the conclusion. Sociological research has provided three main explanations to the involvement of partners in domestic work, including care work. Resources are relevant of individuals within couples, gender equality mindsets are relevant, and time availability is relevant. This theoretical proposal is a good starting point to understand the conditions that policies have to fulfill to promote the involvement of men in care work. First, policies must guarantee sufficient resources for men and women so that care decisions within households are not taken out of material constraint. Second, policies have to be designed in a way that promotes dual carers and dual earners family models. That is, they must not directly nor indirectly promote inequalities between male and female beneficiaries. And third, policies must provide caregivers, all individuals indeed, with sufficient quality time, as some care tasks are time-consuming and many of them cannot be completely outsourced. Laws are very important drivers in the promotion of caring masculinities because they become institutional reference points for people's caring decisions. They offer economic incentives to opt for one or another strategies to reduce work-to-life conflicts. And third, they influence care strategies of couples. As mentioned for parental leave, the type of entitlement, individual versus family right, non-transferable versus transferable, and the level of wage replacement, paid versus non-paid, high versus low wage replacement, and they are crucial design principles to promote gender equality. And it needs politicians who are encouraged to do what is needed also against resistance from gender conservative lobbies and reluctant employers. Apart from parental leave regulations, other supportive policies are needed. Think about institutional childcare. Think about part-time regulations and supportive employers. With this last slide, I hand over to Mark Gärtner. He will now talk about some of the supportive factors just mentioned towards caring masculinity. I would like to say thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Ačiū labai, Eliska.
Thank you, Alex Camber, for your presentation. Let us not waste our time and let us the relation between gender equality and policies. Mark Gärtner will speak on that from the Institute for Masculinity Studies and Gender Research. He's a consultant in different companies, and he will speak about men, care, gender equality, benefits, and strategies for men and companies. Mark, the floor is yours.
Hello, greetings from Berlin, dear ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to be invited to speak at the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. I am really happy about this opportunity. I want to thank our dear colleagues of the Center for Equality Advancement for inviting us to speak here today. This is another step in a fruitful cooperation we had in different projects in the last years. I want, relating to what my dear colleague Alice Cambor just said, elaborate on the question, what does work-life balance have to do with gender equality, and how are both related to men? There are simple answers or more complicated ones. Maybe I try the middle ground. It all boils down to what we call gender care gaps, or gender gaps in general, in care and family work, but also in careers, jobs, pay and pensions. Women do across all EU countries and beyond by far more unpaid household and family work than men do. In the time left, they usually do less paid work and, of course, lower paying work, statistically. This is still true, although mindsets are changing for a long time now, also among men. This is especially true in a quite gender conservative country I come from, Germany. In the 1970s, a West German study, the first one about men's roles in society, found that back then, men in principle began to say yes to gender equality, and that the majority of men see women as equals. Quite a new phenomenon given the ultra-traditionalist views on gender and society in German Kaiserreich, National Socialism and the post-Nazi years in the 1950s and 60s. At the same time, in the 1970s, men still believed that they had little or nothing to do for a change. They saw the roles in families and care as naturally women's roles, and thought their breadwinner role was also natural and unquestionable. But nowadays, in 2022, about 45% of German fathers of newborn children go on parental leave, and more than 90% of the fathers say that they want to be available in families and for their kids also during the working week. So they do not want the role of the weekend or holiday daddy. That is a big cultural change. This change has two big drivers. First, men's changing social roles. They wanted to be more involved as fathers, more active and present in their families than their fathers had been. Moreover, the old breadwinner model eroded. Women depended less on the breadwinning husband, and the breadwinner identity is now less important for men than it was back in the 1970s and before. Second level, the Parental Leave and Allowance Act of 2007. Starting then, the full amount of 14 months of paid parental leave can only be used if one parent takes the minimum of 2 months too. The effect was that more and more fathers took and take at least this minimum. Less than the mothers, that's still true. But a change nevertheless, if you think that in 2006 only about 3% of the fathers took parental leave. And now it's about 45%, in some regions even about 60%. Still, we have a huge gender gap in family care on the one hand, in careers and pay on the other hand. What is true for Germany is also true for other places with similar gender traditions. So we have to explain the stubbornness and persistence on different levels. And I strongly believe it is the patterns of persistence in the labor sphere, in companies and workplaces, that are only changing reluctantly when it comes to work-life balance and gender equality. In the 1990s, US sociologist Joan Acker summarized her studies on gender in organizations and critically stated that there is an underlying concept of jobs and workers that form expectations, structures and cultures of workplaces. She stated that for each job, workplaces demand what she called an abstract worker. Persons who are disembodied, more or less neutral as persons, with no particular mark, and have no other obligation than to do this particular job and to restore their working capacity to go on and on to do it. So when everything is excluded that is not paid work, then unpaid work, family care and self-care do not have a place in this game. While women were seen as natural carers, thus being excluded from better jobs and paid less, the male non-carer was what came closest to this abstract worker. He was the ideal employee. We can call this an androcentric type of organization and work. So we see work in the center of men's lives, as much as we see men in the center of workplaces. Of course, there were always employees who did not fit in perfectly, who had to justify their otherness as exceptions. Men still have to justify their family care, while women have to justify their careers. This is why in our research 20 years ago that Ellie mentioned, we almost always found male employees who had to legitimize themselves for their wish to be an involved father or go on parental leave, reduce their working time. We had men working part-time who felt exotic and marginalized or invisible. And it is deeply rooted not only in society as a whole, but in the work processes and cultures. While doing work, we are also doing gender. Joan Acker identified 4 levels on which the gender difference is reproduced. First, in work activities, practices and ongoing routines, which we usually call men's jobs and women's jobs. Second, on a symbolic level of stereotypical images, clothes, cultures. Third, on the level of interactions, not only between men and women, but also within these gender groups. 4, in the mindsets and ideas of employees and managers their differentiated patterns of perception and interpretation. And it is on all these levels we have to unlearn this simplicist logic of stereotypical gendering in order to overcome androcentric work-life patterns. It means making men visible as carers. Men who care are game changers when not invisible anymore. They do more of what traditionally women do, and they do less of what traditionally seemed the one and only way to exist as a man. Exist for the job, for the career, for a powerful role in society. But why should they change towards care when it is so hard? And why should employers care when it seems not useful for them? It makes sense because there are really a lot of benefits for each of them. For women, benefits seem evident. A smaller care gap means better work and career prospects, higher pay and pensions, less dependency, etc. For men, there are also a lot of benefits. Their societal roles have changed. Many of them actually want to care, at least as involved fathers, but to some extent also for other family members. This change of roles is key. Like women, many men feel stuck and trapped by narrow and traditional stereotypes. For many of them, the traditional career and breadwinner track lost appeal and does not make too much sense anymore. It's not only about fairness, although this is critical, but also about men's quality of work and life. It means a deeper connection to their friends, their kids, and families, which men want and which is actually quite healthy. Talking about health, in countries with more gender equality, we usually see higher points in men's well-being and quality of life. They live longer, and the gender gap in life expectancy is one of the few where men are consistently bad off, which is a very obvious cost of masculinity, or let's say non-caring masculinity, and of lacking self-care. We also see, as our Norwegian colleagues pointed out in a study, less violence in families with more gender equality. This is good for men as well. So, taking the burden of traditional and breadwinner power-related masculinity models from men is actually good for ourselves as men. And employers and organizations have benefits too. First, because many managers and employers are men, so they directly profit by these positive effects applying to men. But it is more. Men will be healthier and less off-work, care-oriented working cultures lead to more work satisfaction and probably higher productivity. If caring masculinities support gender equality in working life and families, then well-educated women can much easier remain at their workplaces, which is what employers want, or at least they should want, in their own best interest. There are a lot of studies that already make the business case for gender equality, saying gender equal cultures avoid the loss of female talent, better recruiting, the prevention of sexism, harassment, and toxic work cultures, and thus enhance motivation and productivity. But what is still lacking is to link this to caring masculinities. Trying to fix the women to make them fit for androcentric workplaces is a very narrow concept with obvious limitations. Instead, we should fix the structures, build workplaces that see women and men, and in fact persons of all genders, as employees with private social networks and care obligations. Then, of course, comes the question how we do that. How can we connect work-life balance with gender equality by focusing on men? In our recent project Men in Care, we found 3 dimensions that are key. First dimension, structural conditions. We need flexible working hours and locations like remote work and home office, as normal working conditions to enable care and also communication structures that do not exclude carers. Of course, it should be normal that meetings take place within the opening hours of childcare facilities, and when those who care for their sick and elderly relatives are available. And obviously, we need more online and hybrid solutions here. Second dimension is cultural factors. We identified the need for what we can call a culture of care, especially for men, because men are usually the exceptions as carers. This needs, among other things like values, a good in-house communication to talk about men who care, talk about kids, families and kindergartens, about care for sick and elder relatives, about self-care, but also about care at work. A good, careful, non-sexist working culture. And it needs a speak-up culture in which employees, also men, can talk about their care, their needs to be good carers and measures that would help them. Third dimension, human factors and networks. It is on the one hand stakeholders networks that can make care a topic and make proposals for measures. These networks usually cover different HR personnel, gender and diversity representatives, works councils, managers, and maybe other groups. All of these networks should be interested in making progress in building a caring organization. And men who care should have an important role here. What is needed is a group of change makers that continuously cooperate on this matter. On the other hand, management has the key role here, because here we find the gatekeepers of work-life balance, gender equality, and all policies around care. Good managers are flexible enough to give time and space for care, because they know it will eventually pay back if they do, but also pay back if they do not. Moreover, having man managers as role models in caring roles makes a huge difference in credibility, trust, and motivation. Good management is one of the most important topics when it comes to caring workplaces. In the last weeks, we had an international conference in Berlin on caring masculinities at the workplace. And we had a Slovenian manager who actively supports a transmission towards a more caring organization in his own firm, a furniture designer and producer. He changed his company's working time to 30 hours a week, not only for ethical reasons, but because he finds that people are more motivated and productive when they have less stress to bring and get their kids from the kindergartens to the kindergartens, have more time and can work more focused. And he himself leads by example, is an involved father, and also depends on such a workplace culture of care. We need more managers like this, but also politicians and other leaders who really want it, who really show that care is part of their everyday life as a man. Because for democratic societies, gender equality and care are key, and we see this clearer than ever in times of war and violence. Men, as employers, should actively involve in this process, rather than passively endure it. Then we can really make a change. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much for having me.
Dėkojame labai.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mark Gardner, for your presentation. We are very sorry for all technical problems. You will be able to receive all the material cleaned from technical interruptions. Now we have questions and answer session. We have all presenters online. Yolanda is also with us. Therefore, if you have any questions, please raise your hand and you will have a chance to answer the question and to any of the presenters. I would also like to remind to all of us watching online that you are also able to ask questions in chat. I know that someone has asked a question on chat. Greta, could you please read it? There was one question on Zoom. And it is the following. When we speak about reducing and shortening the parental leave, what do you think about the well-being, psychological well-being of a child? Because the longer the child stays with his or her mother, the stronger he or she is psychologically. What is more important, a healthy person now and later, or taxes? Thank you very much for this question. Would anyone like to answer it? Yolanda, do you have any studies to that regard? Thank you very much for this question. It is a very complicated one. You would probably agree to the fact that there are different studies in this area, and unfortunately they are very controversial. Therefore, it is easy to use them for different types of manipulations. You could find studies stating that, yes, indeed, the child has to stay with his or her mother. You would be able to find studies that stating that it is very important for a child to be with his or her mother and father. But let me say one thing. Quality childcare cannot be ensured in Lithuania in all families, and not all children have this possibility. When there's lack of services, the situation is the following. Children completely abandoned and deprived of education. If we want to say that the socialization of children up to 3 years has to take place in the family only, and if we say that this is not this is the reason why we should not expand the child care services, then that's problematic, because not each and every family can ensure this. The time spent with mother or father is not sufficient. We have to see if this time spent with one of the parent or both of parents is quality time. If the mother or the father is watching television while the child is running around, this is really cannot be considered a quality care if you compare to a child care, for example, in the kindergarten. By definition, mother's or father's care is not necessarily better. Child care is a complex question. Not each and every family can ensure it. There are different children in different families. Therefore, we have to speak about this. Well, probably this is the case. Probably you are right. This is the answer to the person who wrote the question, because we don't know the situation. Being with parents may be considered quality time if it meets different needs of child development. Well, this is my answer. Thank you very much. Yes, we have yet another question. Good afternoon, Vilma Vensukonytė. I am a journalist. I would like to thank you all for the presentations. My question is the following, and it is dedicated to all presenters. How great participation of men is reflected in the entire picture and promoting better balance? Thank you very much, Vilma. Would anyone like to answer this question? As far as I understand, the question was addressed to all of you. So those, please give me a sign if you are ready to answer it. Mark, could you please answer this question? Could you please be the first one? Did you have the interpretation?
Again, so if I understood it well, the question was about the bigger picture of involvement of fathers into the care and into the family life. So what would be the main things you would like to mention, like really to summarize the essence of it?
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Well, I tried to summarize the essence in my presentation, but to summarize the summary would be, yes, it is. I mean, it's good for many sides, for many stakeholders. What's happening when men take more parental leave or reduce their working hours to spend more time, for example, with their kids? I mean, the men are usually happier because they do what they want to do. The women can be happier. I mean, there might be some negotiations about good parenting. Of course, we see that, but usually they are happier because women, mothers usually feel quite restricted with like being mothers only. At least in Germany, that's a big discourse. And then the kids are usually happier because Yolanda explained kids have, for good reasons, a right for both parents. They have the right to spend time also with the fathers, and that is also good for the whole family system usually, and it reduces the probability of violence in families as well. If both parents have a say in the education, have a more peer-to-peer relationship, that reduces the probability of violence or conflicts in families as well. So that's how I understand the question.
Thank you very much, Mark. Ellie, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just to conclude do you understand me? Yeah? Okay. Yes. Just to conclude what I was trying to say, I think the one thing is that from the big picture, what I want to say is that gender relations, since I work in this research field, this is now almost 30 years, and I see from the big picture that the gender relations have changed in many European countries. So first of all, women in all over Europe have taken take much more part in paid labor, and second, men started to get into these caring roles, on higher rates, and this is actually based on these leave regulations. And as I said before, we see from example like Iceland, they changed the leave regulation into this 3+3+3 regulation, and we saw immediately that this increases the number of men taking father's leave, and it increases the rate because it was based on 80% income. So this is really this is a thing that we should focus on. We have to provide individual leaves, we have to provide non-transferable leaves, and we have to provide it highly paid. This is, I think, this is the way to go. It has to be a use it or lose it regulation. So if you don't take it, you lose it. You lose it. If you don't take the 3 months, 80 or 100% paid leave, you lose it. And this should be the case.
Thank you, Ellie, very much. Jolanta, dar jūsų.
Aš tik taip
Well, I could only add to what has already been said. We have to have in mind the following. Men's inclusion in care may have a radical transformational impact. The very fact that it's women who take care of household predetermine their role in employment. For example, regardless of profession, because they say that women are better in certain fields, such as being a teacher, a doctor, because they have a certain inherent quality to be better at this work. And then in the end, these professions are lower paid, they are less valued. And then the question why there are so few women at high decision-making positions. And again, this is a stereotype that it is men who are inherently better at this job. And we have to change these stereotypes. Everybody has to include to get involved in this, and it may have a huge transformational impact. Taking care of environment and taking care of each other, how important it is to understand, even when we have in mind environmental matters. Do we take care of environment because this is just another form of taking care of another person? And indeed, all the wider aspects, they are related to the phenomena that we have discussed today. The war and conflicts simply demonstrate the undermining of taking care of each other, because we could completely avoid the situations we are going through today if we took better care of each other. Since now, thank you very much. Now it's time for coffee. If you have any questions, please leave them in the chat window. And now we'll have a 15-minute break. Please come back in 15 minutes. And we'll continue the discussion on why we have to achieve work-life balance. Thank you very much for all of those who read presentations.
O tu negali išjungti. Atjungi žmogus. Negali. Nes aš vienu metu įsigandu, galvoju, gal pas tą pranešėją, ten, žinai, kažkas namuose triukšmą kelia.
Čia sėdi, neatsimeni?
Sėdėjo, ne, čia kažkokia moteris sėdėjo.
Ai, Jolantos ne.
Jo, tik nebūk Jolanta per video.
Jolanta apkeistam su manim.
Šiaip, žinai, kad ne, Donatai, žinai ką, sėš čia, nes tu pagavoji, o aš Jolana ten, o tu čia. Nu, tai tada ir čia.
Noriu, bet po to, žinai, man vis tiek reiks daryti.
Sveiki konferencijos dalyviai ir dalyvės, kolegos, daug matau kolegių. Malonu visus matyti, mes privalome eiti prie kitos konferencijos dalies, tai yra diskusija. Diskusija, kurioje mes kalbėsim, kodėl ir kaip reikia siekti šeimos bei darbo įsipareigojimų derinimo. Diskusiją vesiu aš pats, esu Donatas Paulauskas, Ignitis grupės žmonių gerovės, įvairovės ir įtraukties vadovas, o kalbėsiu tikrai ne vienas, o su puikiais pašnekovais. Tai Tomas Vytautas Raskevičius, žmogaus teisių komiteto pirmininkas, taip pat kartu su mumis jau jūsų matyta lygių galimybių kontrolierė Birutė Sabatauskaitė. Turėsime netrukus ir socialinės apsaugos ir darbo viceministrą Vytautą Šilinską. Taip pat diskusijoje dalyvaus Vilana Pilinkaitė Sotyrovič, lygių galimybių plėtros centro ekspertė. Ir turėjome turėti dar vieną viešinę diskusijos dalyvę, dėja dėl pasikeitusių aplinkybių jos neturime. Turėjo su mumis dalyvauti Lica Pakosta, Estijos lyčių lygybės ir lygių galimybių komisarė, bet manau, vietoj jos dalyvavimo turėsime daugiau laiko klausimams, diskusijai. Tai pačius klausimus galėsite užduoti visos diskusijos metu. Aš tik trumpai pabandysiu pakalbinti prieš tai kiekvieną pašnekovą. Turiu pasirengęs keletą klausimų kiekvienam. Ir taip pat nepamirškit, kad stebintieji virtualiai mūsų konferenciją gali užduoti klausimus tenai, Zoom erdvėje, virtualiai, rašydami tos klausimus, mes vėliau juos apžvelgsim. Tai Vilana, nuo jūsų norėčiau pradėti. Mes Jolantos dėka visai neblogai pažvelgiam ir į Europos Sąjungą, ir Jolanta išryškino Lietuvos situaciją, kaip mes ten atrodom su darbo ir šeimos derinimu. Bet man įdomu, kaip jūs, Vilana, apibrėžtumėt tą mūsų Lietuvos.
I'm sorry for the mixed channels. Vilana, what is your opinion about the gender balance? Thank you very much for your question. I would like to draw your attention to the following. When we speak about work-life balance, we have in mind the context of childcare, because we do have a number of laws regulating this aspect. On the other hand, we have a number of measures, and more measures as compared to the care of other dependable persons. For example, the disabled people or old people, because there are even more gaps in this particular area. Now, in this discussion, when answering this question, I would like to focus on the area related to childcare. On the one hand, when we speak about childcare in the context of families and their choices, we hear a saying that this is a personal choice of couples and personal desires of couples, and we shouldn't interfere into families' affairs, because it is up to the family to decide who has to take parental leave. Our study has revealed that individual choices are very important. However, they are not autonomic. In most cases, they are being influenced by legislation, by cultural context, by stereotypes. It depends on one of the parents' choice, and on work culture. All of these contexts have an impact on individual choices and constitute a certain architecture of opportunities. In Lithuania, we have laws on childcare. We have the laws on the social benefits in cases of childcare. It stipulates very specific schemes regarding this area, and it has been noted by the specialists that these child care schemes do not encourage the model of 2 breadwinners and 2 carers. They promote traditional roles. The Lithuanian scholars say that this is because of the financial benefit to the family, as most of these things depend on benefits and on salary. Working parents make contributions to the social fund, and the benefits on childcare depend on these contributions. Lithuania also faces social and structural problems, as there is still a payment gap. And quite often it is less painful financially to lose women's salary rather than men's salary, because women typically earn less. And quite often parents take paternal leave in the second year of the child care, when it is possible for the mother to work and still get the benefit. The parental leave or maternity leave is rather long in Lithuania, which strengthens the stereotypical role of women. And quite often, work-life balance is hard to achieve in Lithuania due to the lack of accessibility and lack of affordability of childcare services. In cities, there's a lack of childcare services, while in small towns they are also inaccessible. For example, one family has mentioned that there are 5 kindergartens around where they live. However, it was impossible for them to place the child in one of them. Therefore, care in Lithuania remains the burden of women. Thank you, Yolanda. Please correct me if I'm wrong. The opinion that Lithuania has excellent conditions for raising children is myth. Am I right in that? Yes, it can be said like this. We have to have in mind the fact that Lithuania has a number of social bubbles. And in certain social bubbles, it may be considered a myth, while in a different social bubble, it may be considered a reality. The situation is different across Lithuania. However, our study shows that for the generation which is below 30 years of age, it is considered a myth. Young people are very critical about this. They say, indeed, financial aspect is very important, but these benefits do not provide financial guarantees. Therefore, more flexibility is needed regarding the leaves, because the leaves as they are today do not encourage men to take paternity leave. Currently, they are not attractive to people who receive higher income. Yes, you talked about the model of 2 carers and 2 breadwinners. Can we say that we have made a first step towards this? Because now 2 breadwinners is rather a usual thing in Lithuania. Am I right in this? Yes, you are. Otherwise, it is impossible, because the family wouldn't be able to survive with 1 breadwinner. And we see families of single parents which are very restricted. The family of 2 breadwinners is being established. However, the family of 2 carers is not yet. Yes, we have made 1 step, and now we need to make the second step. Now I would like to ask a question and address it to Vice Minister. And my question is related to the directive. And this is the Work-Life Balance Directive. The official name of this directive is much longer than that. And the new thing is non-transferable time of leave. And Yolanda has already mentioned it. Mr. Vice Minister, could you please tell us who this new directive is aimed at and what it is going to change in our lives? The directive, the Commission started working on the directive in 2017. The aim was to include more women into the labor market and to achieve better work-life balance. The aim was to encourage men to contribute to caring. Sweden has this model since 1995. The studies demonstrate that this law is going to promote fathers to get involved in this activity, because then fathers begin understanding better their wives, and there are fewer divorces when fathers take part in care. The directive stipulates 3 things that are going to be universal, because all countries will have to transfer this directive into their legislation. And one demand is 10 days of leave, and then at least 4 paid months of parental leave. In Lithuania, we have 2 months, and there's no changes. However, out of 4 months, 2 months have to be paternity leave. And then the third stipulation is regarding the greater flexibility at work. Earlier, the right to ask for more flexible working conditions was allowed before the child was 4, and now it is going to be legitimate to ask for flexible working conditions before the child is 8. Indeed, there is certain resistance for every change. We can understand it, because people tend to do things as they used to do. But we think that this change is necessary, because we are talking about families and about them being stronger. You kept mentioning it should be fathers should take leave. There were a number of should in your speech. So it seems that now we are going to force fathers to take paternity leave against their will. Are we going to force this paternity leave on fathers? No, no way. We will not be able to force fathers to do that, and we will not be able to force parents to take care of their children. We can only introduce financial incentives because we think that families and fathers will make use of these 2 months. And we are going to spend over 3 million euros per year, which is more than earlier. And this is going to be the incentive. The non-transferable months of paternity leave should be attractive because we are planning to pay to compensate 100%. Of course, there is a ceiling imposed that is 3,200 euros per month. And I think that the fathers will do their best, will see how it looks like, and they will enjoy it. Well, unfortunately, they cannot suspect yet that they're going to enjoy it. Yes, indeed, you talked about changes, and quite often they say that now the state interferes in the private life of people, and the state wants to determine how long a parent should stay with his or her child. What do you think about this? No, we are not going to regulate, but we are going to provide incentives, because as we look at scientific research, we see that this model is more favorable, and we will encourage to use it.
Thank you. Now I'd like to speak with the Equal Opportunities Ombudsperson about this directive. Your office was very active in making remarks from the very initiative of this directive. You had your position already then on how to improve this legal act. And my question is, how your office how does your office see this directive from the equal opportunities perspective, and will it help to make the objective, to achieve the objective that is set? I think that we should see that the directive seeks to ensure gender equality and flexible working conditions, not only regulated by law, but its practical implementation. Certain minimal standards are set for the entire EU, and non-transferable childcare leave was something that was discussed most. Regulation of this non-transferable period is seen as a benefit for us, but we have to discuss this issue on both levels, both on the regulatory level and on the strategic level, and also on changing the mindset. We are facing huge gaps in the strategy towards the achievement of this objective. We see many people reacting to this, and people think that the childcare leave will be shorter. No, we have the same period, but each time when we address the issues of childcare, people often say that there is a lack of childcare services, public childcare services that are preschool, and therefore we lack public or political initiatives. Maybe now we should start thinking about the compensation mechanism for parents that are unable to get childcare services. Previously, we had this compensation mechanism for private kindergartens, but it does not encompass all the families. But there are a number of families that are unable to afford private kindergartens even with this amount of compensation. And research shows that countries that the experience of which was used have a higher percentage of services in childcare. You saw my slides, the responsibility for childcare in terms of family, state guaranteed services. And in this area, unfortunately, Lithuania is lagging behind, which is also the implementation of the Barcelona targets. And this is one of the greatest disadvantages for us. This is a very wide topic in terms of work and life balance. And childcare is not the only topic, because even if children reach the age of 2, they are still children. We have to find the responsible institution to take care of them. And we really lack those services available, especially for persons that need more intensive care. For example, children with special needs after the age of 18 also need those services, and we lack those services. The Forum of People with Disabilities also presented this problem. Being in families is happiness, but we are speaking about finding the right balance. And we're also speaking about short-term services. For example, if people want to get this respite in order to for example, to have some other activities and leave children for certain short-term childcare places. This could be an option. Unfortunately, Lithuania will lack this. And the position and mindset of employers is also very critical here. I'm happy that all this package that our office has been discussing with all this package, we will finally present legislative initiatives which could also foresee certain concessions due to the age or inability of persons and children. But there are many things that still need to be addressed and to move forward. In the beginning, I said, well, last week we saw new poverty rates, and one of the most important aspects that we have to see is not only the absolute poverty rate. Of course, absolute poverty rate in Lithuania is better now, but we have to speak about the poverty risk rate. In Lithuania last year, 560,000 people still got into this risk of poverty group. Well, that was the statistics of 2020. 51% of single parents with children actually get into this group of people at risk of poverty. Therefore, we need to think of legislative initiatives and policies on this challenge, to tackle this challenge. Gender equality is important here as well. So the lack of services available is a major problem, which leads to many other related problems and challenges. Well, when I was listening to the first part of your contribution, I thought that, well, maybe Lithuania is not ready to implement this directive. Maybe we don't need it. Maybe we should do it later. Well, very often we criticize ourselves, but we're not that bad. If we take the employment rates, we can consider ourselves to be Nordic Europe, not Southern Europe or Eastern Europe. Actually, our women work even more than women in Western Europe. They're recruited much more easily, and it is easy for them to integrate into the labor force. Well, certainly salary rate is quite low, but stereotypically we think that our women are much more stronger than in Western Europe and our men are much weaker than in Western Europe, and that women work so much unpaid work, do so much unpaid work at home in their families. Well, I wouldn't generalize this way that our women are stronger and men are weaker than in Western Europe, but we're speaking about the huge burden of unpaid work. Is that women do more unpaid work, that more unpaid work is done by women, and this actually prevents any balance or possibility for rest for women. And this leads to the burnout for women. We have jobs, working hours are quite high in Lithuania compared to other countries. But we also have to think of cultural mindset that, for example, overworking is considered to be a norm and a tradition. And this has a huge impact for recruiting women. For example, when women are of childbearing age, they might be discriminated. And this discrimination is more clever because employers do not say that we are not employing you due to your childbearing age or because you have small children. But this is a huge burden, additional burden for us. Vilana is raising a hand. I would like to give the floor to Thomas and then Thomas. So we are discussing about women in labor force. How do you see this new directive? Can it change anything? And about women's strength? I will be open. Well, members of parliament don't think that directives are so very important. These are some implementation measures that we have to make. Speaking about untransferable parental leave period, very often people agree and members of the parliament agree, but very often it boils down to funds, to monetary meanings. In all this discussion on the transposition of a directive, a strategical objective is lacking here, and this is absent. Because our goal is to have a shorter child care leave period that would be best compensated and the best availability of childcare services for those people who want to actively engage in the labor market. And we need this for ensuring gender equality and developing gender equality. I see it as a measure of gender equality, this directive, but I lack strategic goal. So far, the ministry is not making any strategical foresight, and it is moving to horizontal planning. We might agree or not, but I think that unless we have strategic goals to achieve, for example, a simple task to lower the payment gap between men and women, or for example, to lower the gap of women out of labor market. We don't have these objectives. And when transposing the directive, we feel that we lack the understanding of why we are doing this, because we don't have strategic goals. I represent the parliament, and the transposition of directives is the responsibility of the executive, but I'm very happy that in the parliament we have different initiatives that are related to work and life balance, to gender equality, and working conditions and flexibility of those working conditions. And for childcare services that could be provided by different households. I think that these measures should be seen in complexity by the executive, because all these measures increase balance and increase the availability of necessary services. Thank you, Thomas. Vilana, you had a remark. Speaking about women's employment and salary gap, if we are moving towards horizontal priorities, it is unclear how this gender equality target will be set in horizontal tasks. But the problem that we fail to address is not only about women's employment, is that the involvement of men in the care sphere is very low. It is 3 times as lower as of women's. And this is not reflected anywhere. This problem is not being addressed or raised. Yes, we have high employability of women, but we have certain spheres that women are most employed, for example, in the social sphere, where salaries are lower. And the involvement of men in this sphere is also related to the salary gap. Numbers sometimes might look attractive, but we should look deeper into that, look for the root causes and find the solutions to these problems. Yes, on the one hand, we have achieved a lot, but on the other hand, the involvement of men is very low, and therefore we are lagging behind with gender equality. Gender equality index is quite low in Lithuania. I think that we have to look it in a more complex way. There are 2 issues, the quality and quantity of employment. We are good at employment quantity, but employment quantity, I have in mind the gender balance in managerial positions, the spheres of employment. So this is about the quality of employment. Before giving the floor to the executive that Thomas spoke about, I would like to remind you that you should think of questions, and I will open the floor for the questions from the audience. Now, could you respond on the communication of the directive, the measures, or how well we are ready for the transposition? Well, communication should be constant, therefore I'm here speaking about the horizontal principle in gender balance. I think that we are going on the right path. When we have the horizontal principles, it means that specialists at different ministries can take gender equality principle and include into their activities. This means that gender equality is not the remit of one ministry. Speaking about employment quality, we have employment quantity, but not employment quality. And this is a problem, but this is a problem in general with the labor market, because we are at the bottom ranking with the number of jobs of the added value, or with the people responding that their jobs are inspiring and interesting. Around 5% in Lithuania say that they have an interesting job. This is the research of the OECD. In terms of salaries, we were ahead of Romanians and Romania and Bulgaria. In 2021, salaries increased. The average salary in Lithuania is 11 euro per hour and 41 euro per hour in, for example, Belgium. So it is difficult to find the right balance when we have this problem, or we have salaries at this low level. You mentioned that we need both healthcare and childcare services in order to improve. In order to live a normal life, we have to have good accommodation, good job, and good services. Maybe I would like to open the floor for questions from the audience. You have to raise your question, and you can ask a question or make a remark.
Lietuvos socialinių mokslų centras.
Julia Mažolienė, Lithuanian Center for Social Sciences. I have numbers in my head. And my question is to Mr. Vice Minister. You have mentioned that the directive is going to be transferred soon, and that these additional 2 months will be paid for 100%. Could you please indicate the argument? Are we going to value father's contribution more than we value mother's contribution? What are the arguments? Indeed, I understand that we seek men to participate in family life more, but aren't women being discriminated against? Well, I said that there are 4 months, and 2 months for mothers, 2 months for fathers, and all of them will be paid 100%. Basically, mothers were using this period, and now they say that this is an incentive for fathers as well, because Earlier, fathers were reluctant to take leaves. In general, it's going to be 4 months, 100% paid. We have one question online. Well, it's Mark who wrote the comment. Mark, could you please read your question?
Was just the argument, or I try to make the point for another interest of men in more gender equality and more work-life balance, in fact, in more care and self-care, and that is life expectancy. We see Lithuania has a gender gap in life expectancy between 9 and 10 years. I don't know the recent numbers, but they are usually quite high, almost as high as Russia. And super high in relation to other countries, and we see overwhelming evidence in all our research that this gender gap is highly connected to gender equality and inequality, which does not mean that Lithuania is as gender unequal in other questions and other issues as it is in life expectancy, but it is connected almost everywhere to different lifestyles and traditional lifestyles of men and masculinity, of virility, so ways of being a man that are usually unhealthy. And it is connected to work, it is connected to power, it is connected to images and stereotypes of masculinity, and it is connected in a different way to care or non-care. So caring masculinities actually help men in terms of health and in terms of life expectancy. And this is connected to a more or better work-life balance too.
Kas norėtų sureaguoti, pridėti, pakomentuoti?
Would anyone like to react to that? Vice Minister? Yes, indeed, this is one other argument. We can do nothing but support it. One more comment. My name is Žemaitė. Thank you very much for this event, because I have discovered a lot of new and important information despite the fact that I've been interested in this for 12 years now. Thank you very much for all those who gave presentations. When coming here, I was a little bit uncertain because this was not the first time when I participated in events on life-work balance. Thank you very much. It was successful. And now I'm going to provide a comment, and later on I will ask 2 questions. I remember 10-12 ago, we had intense discussions at the European Union level and at the national level, and we were discussing how we can address equal opportunities at work and regarding work-life balance. One of the ways was to fund the unpaid work. Basically, they meant paying compensations for women because they were working longer after work. And now I would like to use this space and express my satisfaction that we did not choose this way, because we are not giving women peanuts for them taking care of babies. We are happy that we have chosen a different way, saying that our women are clever, they work hard, and they are worth a lot, while they do a lot of low-paid work. And this is a good thing. I really wanted to see more representatives from other ministries. I also wanted to see representatives from family councils. Unfortunately, 1 year passed, and the work-life balance is just a matter of gender equality. Indeed, Ombudsperson, I do agree that the context has expanded. Now we talk not only about parental leave or kindergartens, we are able to see broader context. However, it is not enough. The Ministry of Social Affairs and Labour will not be able to deal with all of these matters. Probably the horizontal approach, which was introduced as an initiative, could help. What I've heard from presenters, I've heard that COVID basically lifted the discussion on another level because we have labor efficiency and we have lobbyists who are working on work-life balance. This is very good for families, but we are going to see how it's going to end. The legal changes do not provide for the possibilities to make use of these changes. The right to ask does not become the right to receive. And this is unfortunate, especially in the areas where single mothers or people taking care of the disabled need more services and they don't get them. Different ministries have to coordinate their positions, and I do hope for this horizontal approach to work. Thank you very much for the goals. I really needed them because I wanted to understand why we are going to implement this directive. 30 million euros will be well spent, and I hope that 30 million for benefits is very good. However, everybody spoke about the work-life balance and the balance in providing services. If we have 3 million for implementing the directive, then 30 million will have to be used for improving services. Indeed, we will have 1 or 2 kindergartens that will be expensive and for VIP families. However, if we try to make sure that the families have access to services, it's going to be different. I really hope that our strategy and our great policy will be based on appropriate pillars. Would anyone like to react? Thank you, Rasa. Indeed, it was an excellent summary of our discussion. Well, I would like to say once again that work-life balance is a very broad subject. And due to time constraints, we are not able to discuss all the aspects. Regarding the pandemics, in some cases, when stressing flexible and remote work, the priority was given for people with care responsibilities. It's even hard to translate into Lithuanian. I think that the COVID-19 pandemics provided for new solutions at workplaces. It helped us all understand that it is not possible to do certain work without providing certain conditions, and it gave an understanding that the work can be done remotely. Because earlier, everybody were afraid that if they allow flexible time, nobody knows how it would develop, that the people might not do their work. And now it has proven that it was possible. I see Ellie raising her hand. And then we have one more person ready to ask question. Ellie, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. It's really great that I can take part at this conference. I wanted to ask one question. Here in Austria, we also have quite low rates of men taking father's leave. And so we were we were trying to find what is the reason for a few decades now. And some colleagues did a comparative analysis of the effects of different policies. So they compared the policies in Austria, for example, with policies in Sweden. Sweden was mentioned several times today. So an interesting result was that we saw that in Sweden, and you were talking about the employment rate of women, that in Sweden, the most important policy target was increasing the employment rate of women. So all other political targets and goals were subordinated. So the most important one was increase the employment rate of women. And then you talk about welfare regulations, parental leave regulations, labor market regulations, family policy, and things like that. So they were all subordinated. And this is a situation we did not have in Austria. We really had a situation, the employment rate of women was increased. On the other side, we had parental leave regulation with a quite, I would say, gender traditional norm. So they were also directed towards women taking care. So on the one side, policies for women increasing the employment rate. On the other side, women should take care at home. So we had really different policies, and this made a bit chaos in Austria. So I wonder, how would you describe the situation in Lithuania? Do you have one most important policies and others are subordinated in Sweden, or would you say it's more a situation, a bit chaotic situation we had in Austria for a long time now? Thank you.
Ačiū.
Well, regarding the situation whether our situation is chaotic, what do you think, Thomas? Well, if there's chaos in Austria, then it's madness in Lithuania. It is really hard to compare because the experiences are very different, the problems are different, and the challenges are different. Therefore, such direct comparison might look attractive for the European Institute for Gender Equality. However, I think that we have to take into consideration the specificities of each country as well as the cultural things. In Scandinavian countries, when they talked about non-transferable leaves, they talked about changing the attitude of society, changing the attitude of men. And they talked about publicity campaign where children are lifting weights with one hand and pushing pram with another hand. Indeed, we need some more time. Yeah, please have patience. Now I would like to take the opportunity and will bring in the angle of organizations and companies. Yolanda has mentioned that there is a gap between the parental leave and the time when the child is admitted to, for example, kindergarten or school. And women usually fill in this gap in Lithuania. Now, when I come from an organization and when I look at similar organizations, I see that businesses try to fill in this gap. And slowly, we have the understanding that organizations and companies can step in and take care of their employees and provide more flexible working conditions to achieve better work-life balance. We have children's rooms. For example, now our Ignitis company group is thinking about summer camps for children. And we are brainstorming how to meet the need. that is not insured by the state. But this, it's up to an organization to take this route. Certain organizations think it is important, others don't think this way. So my question is addressed to Mr. Vice Minister. Do you have a policy direction for including companies and businesses, for them to help their employees to achieve better work-life balance? Well, recently we had a discussion in the labor market that there's a lack of employees, and this is very good because this increases competition, and the companies need to improve salaries and also improve other conditions in order to attract employees. The companies were doing their best to provide more flexible working conditions, and we need the situation to continue. I think it helps. We have a certain problem. There's resistance to change because our economic structure is moving on from the low-value economic structure towards the high or the highest value economic system, and certain employers are against it. However, others understand it. We have to compete for employees while providing them what they need. And from my personal experience, I can say that it is very important for managers of companies to talk to their employees, because it's not a good practice when somebody will offer a universal one-fit-for-all solution. The lack of kindergartens is sometimes very painful if you live in one district of Vilnius, while it is not as acute if you live in a different district. It depends on the area. Therefore, individual solutions have to be sought. The floor goes to Birute. Competition is not the only thing. We, in our ombudsperson of equal opportunities, we can say that organizations want to provide conditions for work-life balance and for ensuring gender equality. But we have to understand that some measures that you talked about, for example, child care rooms, may be established in larger companies. However, a lot of people work in small and medium-sized companies. I can say that my company is rather small. Therefore, I can't imagine child care room in our organization, despite the fact that we would love to have it. I think we should not leave it as it goes. Regarding the short-term or long-term services, we hope that somebody will implement the national policy, either employers or employees will somehow cover the lack of services. No, we cannot have such a goal because it will not contribute to ensuring neither gender equality nor equal opportunities. Vilana, the floor is yours. I would like to draw your attention to two things. On the one hand, organizations depend on the culture, on the opportunities for life-work balance, and on their readiness. On the other hand, the research demonstrates that it depends on political will in the organization. For example, if decision makers see a goal, a need for such measures, if they understand the importance of gender balance and its implementation, then these measures can be easily implemented because there's political will. If the political will is lacking, employees have no possibilities to make an influence because companies are different, as Birute has mentioned. One other thing that I would like to mention is that regarding business and services, I am really irritated when I hear that businesses can provide different services. Indeed, private businesses do provide services of childcare, which are rather expensive and for a very limited number of people. Because the compensations of 100 euros, as it is indicated by indifferent research, 100 euros does not help to meet any needs. This means that the private company will raise the price of the service by 100%, by 100 euros. Basically, it's a waste of money. When we have in mind the infrastructure development of businesses and private services, well, indeed, they are still useful. However, they should not become the only direction that the state should take. Well, indeed, you wanted to say that we have to have alternative ways. Regarding childcare rooms, let's not forget that it is only a room. It is not a service, because a service involves care and it has to be fulfilled by somebody, not by mother who comes into the room with a laptop. It has to be there has to be a service and not just a place to leave a child. Thank God, free to move. Regarding the businesses, kindergartens, and 100 euro compensation, we haven't implemented these practices that have been successful in other countries, in which prices are regulated. It is banned to make profit of the situation. We do need political will, new elections approach, and we'll see how it works. We have talked a lot, however, I miss trade unions in this dialogue on work-life balance. Last year, we had a survey, and we asked large trade unions, umbrella trade unions, about how they imagine work-life balance, and all of them stated that this was a matter of NGO representing families. Indeed, families have to establish an NGO, come to the politicians, to the Lithuanian parliament, and ask for a certain directive. Yes, we did a survey, and if you want, I can provide you with the results. While the trade unions have such a point of view towards work-life balance measures, I do not think that we can expect a big change. Indeed, we may move towards the rights of the child. We haven't touched upon that today as well, but unfortunately, I cannot imagine the opportunities of trade unions in this area.
Thank you for reminding trade unions. Yes. The trade unions say that they include work and life balance into the collective treaties. But we will ask them once again. well, the right to get to eligibility and the ability to get this service. One person would like to react via Zoom. Hello. I was raising a hand and then I decided not to react, but I'm reacting. I am from the trade unions. I want to thank you for this discussion. There's many important information, and my reaction is not a question, but a remark rather. But we don't have much time for that. I have many. First of all, I want to say that trade unions really care about work and life balance in Lithuania and the transposition of directives. But for example, laws regulating as for example a recent amendment to the labor code that 4 working days in a week should be given to people working in public institutions. This is a very good institution, but this initiative could have been addressed through the social dialogue. We really could address this issue through the social dialogue. It would have encouraged social dialogue, and now we make a division between people working in the private sector and the public sector. It is not easy for us, for trade unions, to encourage this social dialogue, and especially in smaller businesses. Members of the parliament and Vytautas Raskevičius is here. I think that we really need to strengthen the social dialogue, and some of them could be addressed through the social dialogue. That was my reaction. Thank you very much for this event. Thank you, Daiva, for your remark. We actually have to end this discussion. We don't have time. I thank you, the panelists, and I give the last floor to Mintautė Jurkutė. Thank you, Donatas. I thank all the panelists on the discussion, and I also thank the speakers for your presentations and for your questions and answers. I would like to announce another event in this framework. We spoke about working environment, working conditions, and we see that we have correlations with working traditions and working conditions in terms of work and life balance. On the 9th of June, we are organizing another conference in Swedbank Conference Center, and we will be speaking about personal life and work in general. We did not touch upon those in this event, and we will speak about recommendations for employers and employees for working conditions. You can still register for this event on daugiaubalansos.com.lt, so you're welcome to register for the event in order to continue this discussion. I thank Donatas Paulauskas for your moderation, and I would like to remind you that all the information, all the slides that we saw during this conference can be sent to you by email. If you have any feedback, you can also send it to us. Thank you. Have a good evening.